So you probably all heard that we are a social justice school, and a lot of times we may not understand exactly what that is and what it looks like as far as in relation to our students. So basically, social justice, we are creating agents of change. So when our students go out, we want them to become active members of their communities. And you'll see it there, it says service, learning, and action. So we're teaching our children how to connect to their community and the world around them. And this follows them all the way until they graduate. So they're basically learning how to identify problems in their community, how to address it or how to solve it. So for instance, connecting to our community. Ms. Wyman and I run a community service enrichment, and in that enrichment we'll often talk about what are some problems that we see in the community around us. And if your children don't understand what the community is, we'll say, where you live or even where you go to school, what are some things that you may see? Some children would say, we see a lot of homeless people, or, some people don't have food to eat, or some people don't have clothes to wear. So that's how we address a problem. And we talk about what are some different ways that we can help solve it. So what would we do to solve that? So with this particular one, we had a toy drive, and we donated to a local women and children's shelter. We taught them what a shelter was, that in this particular shelter, it was for women and children who didn't have a place to stay or who were in bad homes and had to leave very quickly. And a lot of times these children didn't have the toys that they needed or the clothes that they needed. So we then asked them, how would that make you feel if you were in that position? Because we want them to be empathetic citizens and understand why they're helping. So we held a toy drive for those children, and we also had like a clothing drive, and it was really cool. We got the Salvation Army truck to come out so they can deliver it, to keep it more hands-on so they would actually feel like they're making a difference. The children do the posters for the drive, and when the truck came out, they got to leave class, and they actually brought the materials out themselves to load onto the truck. So we also did one for helping one shelter for the upcoming winter months. We actually also helped them prepare for that. Once again, we talked to the kids about why we were doing it. We don't know what it's like to be on the streets when it's cold, but there are some people who are, so this is what we can do to help them. And that's how we teach them how to connect with the community. So it really begins with class projects, a lot of service opportunities, and this is what you'll see going with them all the way until they become seniors, and they're designing their own programs for social change. So basically we want to make sure that when our kids leave us, they're active members of their society. They know how they want to make a change in the world around them. So we weave it also into our curriculum. This is a piece of the syllabus from the kindergartners. Back in November, throughout the whole quint, they talked about how women have basic needs, how they can ask for help in different ways, and how we all have a role in society. And they talked about the whole quint. They talked about being thankful for what it is that they have. And they actually held a food drive for one of the local shelters. And they knew what they were doing that for. They knew they were helping this shelter get ready for Thanksgiving, people who didn't have families and were coming into the shelter. So it was really cool because each class had a box outside of the door, and the children knew to come in and drop their cans off into the boxes, and they were very excited to do so. But not only that, it was woven into the curriculum, but the interdisciplinary project, which you'll hear more about later, they made it into their project to wrap up the whole entire quint. So they had someone from the shelter come out, they had an assembly, all the children got to present on what they were thankful for. They actually had like a very cute poem that they did, and a volunteer from the shelter came out and spoke to the kids about why the shelter was in place and why they needed the help. So they connected to it in that way. So that was an excellent idea about how it is actually integrated into the curriculum. And also with social justice, I'm going to give you my slide. We also teach them how to connect to the world around them, not just in their community. So for instance, in April, we held a moment of silence for Trayvon Martin during one of our all-school events. It was a moment of silence, and the children were able to come in and wear their hoodies during that time. We talked about how his murder was unfair and that holding a moment of silence was a way for us to honor his memory. And the children, once again, they really take to becoming agents of change at even an early age. So if we move on, I'm going to show you how young they can get to that. This is third grade. They wove it into their curriculum by talking about child labor. So Ms. Ruddick and Ms. Gambino had a whole point when they talked about child labor. And the kids, they talked about how children in other countries don't always get to go to school and how they don't get to have some of the same things that we have. So they became empathetic citizens in that they learned about it and they did a project which allowed them to place themselves in the shoes of that child. So the whole point they talked about working conditions, they talked about how these children were uneducated, they talked about how, they even learned that some children even sold off and that we don't have those problems over here. So in their project, they had to pretend that they were a child of 8 or 9 and that they had to put themselves in the shoes. So for instance, my daughter is in 3rd grade and she role played on a child that was in the cocoa beans in West Africa. So the children thought, okay, well, it's cocoa beans, so what can be so bad about that? But what they learned was, even though they're picking cocoa beans, those bags are so hard that they can barely carry them. They're so heavy they can barely carry them, and they don't get to go to school, and they're working 10, 13 hours a day at 8 or 9 years old. So also within that project, they had to answer the question, if you were president, how would you change that? So, for instance, my daughter said if she was president, she would abolish all child labor and children would be able to go to school. So that's how they learn to connect to the world around them. And we get a lot of questions about what does it look like in pre-K. So in pre-K for social justice, we talked about each country. So this was a country where we went on a world tour, basically. The pre-K children all created a passport. We started off in America, and we went to different countries that were within our classrooms. And how we wove that into the curriculum, parents and their children could present on their country. So they learned about each other and each other's country and what happens in that country. We had one child present on Trinidad and Tobago with his mom. We had another child here teach us about Jamaica. And they also created dioramas. Pre-K children, 3 and 4 years old, created dioramas that were placed in the hallway. And the dioramas went into the environments of the country, what it looked like. They learned about certain rules of the country, state flags, and we did that throughout the whole quint. I presented on Dominican Republic with the children. I presented about the culture of it, Dominican dolls, and what they were used for, and what they meant. And that's just part of what we did. And they selected an artifact from each country to put in their passport. So for America, we had the flag. For Trinidad and Tobago, we had the flag from that. From Sweden, we had animals that you would find over in Sweden. So we didn't go too deep into a lot of the problems because they are 3 and 4, but we wanted to give them a chance to learn about the world outside and around them. And I went too far. So that's how we integrate social justice into our curriculum. Do you have any questions?